Get some help, Jared Vanderaa. I've seen enough. 0-5 in the UFC. Enough is enough, Jared Vanderaa. It's getting hard to watch. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Pub Sports Radio and welcome to Stat Diggers. We are kicking off 2023 with a very good card, UFC Vegas 67. It's been a while. I think it's been almost like 30 days just about since we've been on here, Weezy, doing the show. But yeah, it feels great to be back.
Dude, it feels real good to be back. Being a content creator is a lot of work. And when we creep up on mid-December, Brady, I know that you feel the same as I do, where it's like, we can't wait for the break to get here. But after about a week or two, it's that moment of clarity that some alcoholics have when they're sober for a while. When you're a degenerate gambler and you haven't put down a bet in like 2.5 weeks, you start to think, I'm getting a little itchy over here. I need to play some bets, Are there money lines out? Are there over-unders out? And, well, we've got all that because it's been a month off. The books are a little bit ahead of the game. We've got some props that have dropped on 5 dimes. We've got over-unders that have dropped on Bet Online. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys because the UFC is back. Brady and I are back on Pub Sports Radio for 2023, and we can't wait to stack cash tickets like flapjacks and beat these bookies with a bag of oranges until we juice them, Brady. I've even got a beer here, man. I mean, hey. I never drink during Stat Diggers, but I am absolutely fired up for this show.
Well, I'm drinking for Stat Diggers. I'm ready to go.
I know you are. You always got that gallon jug of water over there, man.
Speaking of drinking, if you guys have not noticed, I have still not shaved my beard because Keith Peterson has still not went to an AA meeting. I'm still waiting. It's been
Dude, you're going to look like a hobo come February, man. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, I'm starting to look like a hobo right now. So Keith Peterson, if you're listening, go get some help, man. It's getting bad. All right, Weezy. How many fights we got on this card? We got 12 or 13? 12 of them. Like, that's the perfect number. I like 12. So I'm looking forward to this card. And then next week we have a pay-per-view. And then we have 2 weeks. We have a break. And then we have like 8 weeks in a row. So we have a lot of UFC coming our way, which it's well needed. This break has been so long. It feels like forever. But I do want to shout out the chat before we get started. Welcome back, guys. We got Mushroom. First one in the chat. And I cannot wait for Mushroom's debut. I believe on the MMA Engine channel on Wednesday. Shout out to Mushroom. We're going to be seeing him in Lou Betcha live. I cannot wait for that. Probably the most anticipated show of the year. We got Victor in the chat. We got Go Flamingo. We got Bob. We got Lou Betcha himself. We got Kiwi and Kiwi with the donation saying Happy New Year. Appreciate you, Kiwi, for the dono. Happy New Year to you as well. We got Propaholic in the building with a $9.99. Appreciate you, Propaholic. And Propaholic's doing a new show on Twitter Spaces, I believe, with Couch Warrior. So shout out to him in that new show. We got Silky B with the dono as well. $10 Silky B. What is up? How you doing? We got George in the chat. We got Martin in the chat. We have Raw Torque in the chat. We got Cole. We got Modern Day Shaman. I thought it said Modern Day Sherman, like Chase Sherman. Any action? We got Smooth Cat. We got Carthlos. We got War Dog in the chat. Lots of people hanging out. We got Josh Locke's MMA picks. We got Large Connor. Appreciate y'all guys hanging out. You guys can leave a like, subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio. Me and Weezy go live every Sunday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern time. But Weezy, I say we get into it. 12 fights to talk about. And let us kick off 2023 with an absolute banger. I cannot wait for this fight. We have Priscilla Cachoeira going against Ciara Eubanks, a.k.a. Priscilla Catch a Beating, a.k.a. Priscilla Catch a Cheating after the eye gouges against Jillian Robertson. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this fight. We have Cachoeira, 34 years old, 5'7" with a 65-inch reach. Eubanks, 37 years old, 5'4" with a 67-inch reach. Cachoeira, 3 years younger. Cachoeira with a 3-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach disadvantage. Priscilla Cachoeira is 4-1 in her last 5 fights, which I never thought I'd say that, but she is. She had a knockout win against Shanna Dobson, a knockout win against Gina Mazzani, a submission loss to Jillian Robertson, a decision win against Jiyoung Kim, and a knockout win in the first round in her last fight against Ariana Lipski. As far as Ciara Eubanks, 2-3 in her last 5 fights, a decision win against Julia Avila, a decision loss against Ketlen Vieira, a decision loss against Pani Kianzad, a knockout win against Elise Reed, and then a knockout loss against Melissa Gatto. So yeah, we got a striker versus grappler matchup here. Eubanks being a black belt in BJJ. I feel like, it's a good matchup for Eubanks here. I just have some concerns with a couple of things. The first thing is the age of Eubanks. She's now 37 years old. The second thing is the cardio. We see her slow down a lot as the fight goes on. And my concern is if she does not get Cachoeira out of there, which that's very hard to do, what is Eubanks going to look like in that second half of the fight? We saw her kind of fall off a cliff in the Gatto fight and get finished. So Weezy, this is an absolute banger to kick off the new year. Priscilla Cachoeira is never, ever in a boring fight. What are your thoughts on this fight here, Weezy?
Yeah, I was waiting for this line to open because just stylistically on paper, that Priscilla has a hard time stopping takedowns and giving up control time, and she does it all the time. And really, that's how Sijara has been winning fights at the UFC level. She's got good striking, Sijara, but when she's winning fights, she's doing it with her grappling. So it's a very, very interesting fight. Both of these ladies are on the wrong end of 30, and Sijara is 37. But it's Priscilla who's going to be 3 inches taller. Sijara is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage here. When you look at the experience numbers, Sijara about 50 more minutes in the pro cage, but it's Priscilla who's got 2 more pro fights. But Sijara's got the UFC experience advantage, a couple more fights, about 70 more minutes in the UFC cage. When it comes to how these ladies finish fights, Cachoeira only has won by knockout when she's finished fights, and the same thing for Eubanks. Now, Eubanks has only been finished in 1 of 7 pro losses, and Cachoeira has only been finished in 2 of 4 pro losses, and Cachoeira has never been knocked out. She's extremely durable. The beating that she took in the Shevchenko fight was like next level, and I really think that was it Mazzagatti or Yamasaki that almost let Priscilla die in there? But whoever that was literally the last time that they ever reffed in the UFC, and it just goes to show you that we haven't seen Vyacheslav Kisiev since he almost let Benoit Saint-Denis die at the hands of Elizu Zaleski dos Santos, just like we haven't seen whoever it was that reffed that fight. I think it was Yamasaki.
I think so too.
Put up the big heart, and by that he meant that this young woman's heart is going to be removed from her chest and still beating on the canvas floor before I stop this fight. So it's, I do like this fight going over. But while this is on the feet, I think that Sijara is actually going to be okay here. Sijara's got serviceable striking. Priscilla's got a lot of power. She's definitely the one that's been landing knockdowns, has been knocking out her opponents, while Sijara has only knocked out one opponent, and it was Elise Reed, who took the fight on short notice up a weight class. So I do like this fight to go over. I love the grappling and the wrestling advantage that Sijara Eubanks has here. When we look at these stats, Brady, you see a 35% control time for Sijara Eubanks. She's gotten 17 takedowns in 10 UFC fights. She's averaging just under 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, and she's getting those takedowns at about a 45% clip. And we don't really have to worry about Cachoeira getting takedowns, right? She's only gotten 1 in 8 UFC fights, and she's only controlled her opponents for 3% of the 71 minutes that she's been in the cage. So I guess it depends on how you see the striking playing out in this fight. If you think that Priscilla's way ahead on the feet, I think that there could be value in her money line. But if you think that Sijara is going to win just as many minutes on the feet as Priscilla is, it's hard to see Priscilla finding a way to win this fight with 65% takedown defense, allowing almost 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, allowing 1.7 submission attempts against per 15 minutes, and being controlled for 30% of your UFC cage time while only being taken down 9 times in 8 fights. I mean, you think about that, right? 9 takedowns that she's allowed, and she's been controlled for 30% of her UFC cage time, which is going to be about 22 minutes, right? 22 minutes of control time on 9 takedowns allowed. So Sijara is going to be able to win minutes here in the grappling, Brady. And when you look at the strength of schedule numbers, Sijara's wins are a little bit better than Priscilla's, and the overall numbers are very similar. So I think that this is going to be Sijara's fight. Sajara's never submitted anybody, and Priscilla Cachoeira has never been stopped by anything but submission. But we know that Sajara is a black belt, that she's an excellent BJJ practitioner. She just hasn't been able to collect one win by submission in her 14-fight career. So I see Sajara winning this fight by decision, and I see her winning a lot of minutes on the ground here. And it's going to be very interesting while it's on the feet, because you know how Zombie Girl is. She just walks forward, she blocks punches with her face, and she's much tougher than most of her opponents. So sometimes that works when you can count on your durability and your pressure to break opponents. And Sajara has had some cardio problems in the past, so I could see her maybe getting broken here late. But I do like Sajara to win the minutes here and probably win this fight by decision.
Yeah, I have two rules that I implemented last year, and the first rule was don't bet on bad cardio, and don't lay chalk on women's MMA. So I can't bet Eubanks here. I was looking forward to some violence potentially. I was hoping to get the fight doesn't go to decision at some plus money, but no, not at all. The under 2.5 opened up at -150, and I was like, "What the heck is going on?" And then now it's -200 for the under 2.5. Weezy, I know you like the over, and it's plus 160 here.
Yeah, so I did bet that. You know, I mean, you know that when it comes to those over-unders, Brady, I've built that prop template, and there are analytics that go into all of my over-under bets, and it's definitely the stuff that I've been most successful at over 2022 was just winning money on these time prop bets. But look, the over 2.5 is plus 160. That's a 38.5% implied probability. Sajara Eubanks and Cachoeira's fights at the UFC level are going to decision 61% of the time. And these ladies' finish rates or decision rates are 22.6% different than what the implied probability of the line is. So at plus 160, keep in mind that Sajara, the only win that she's finished at the UFC level was against Elise Reed, who's a 115-pounder, who's a white belt with no ground game, who took the fight on short notice against a much bigger, much more experienced opponent with way better grappling. Other than that, Sajara's finished nobody. So I just have to worry about Priscilla landing a big shot on Sajara. I don't see that happening because I see Eubanks getting takedowns, winning minutes on the ground here, and grinding out a decision win. So at plus 160 for the over 2.5, I bet 2 units on it, Brady, and I actually, at that number, had to resist max betting it.
Yeah, because max betting a fight like this is kind of scary, right?
Exactly. But the analytics are screaming in my face that this line is way, way, way underpriced. And I mean, for me, I know that there's a lot of people out there that say that, you know, the only thing that matters is whether you win. For me, the only thing that matters is the number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a stupid number. It really is. I was expecting like plus money on the fight doesn't go decision in general, but the under 2.5 is sitting at -200, just way too wide there. Easily value on the over. And like you said, you got to worry about the Priscilla knockout. And if it does happen, it is probably late if Eubanks does gas. So that's a good look, something I am considering myself. But yeah, not touching a money line for this fight. All right, we'll move on to this next fight. We have Charles Johnson going against Jimmy Flick. We got Johnson, 31 years old, 5'9" with a 70.5-inch reach, going against Jimmy Flick, 32 years old, 5'7" with a 68-inch reach. Johnson 1 year younger. Johnson 2-inch height advantage and a 2.5-inch reach advantage. Charles Johnson's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against Muhammad Makayev, lost that fight by decision. And then he won a split decision against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. And then Jimmy Flick is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against Cody Durden. Prior to that, he got a submission on the Contender Series. So first thing I want to talk about is just these odds. And, you know, these odds this week, they're crazy. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's because people have not been able to bet fights for a while, but these odds are crazy, like on a lot of these fights, including this one. Like Charles Johnson opened up -134, and he got as low as -550, Charles Johnson. And now he's back to -310 here, which in my opinion, it's still pretty wide. I think Charles Johnson does win this fight, but minus 310 is kind of crazy there. Jimmy Flick, he did retire. He's coming back, but he's very dangerous on the mat. It's just on the feet. It's going to be Charles Johnson all day. I think he has a lot of tools, and I think he eventually does knock out Jimmy Flick, but Jimmy Flick's going to be very live early. This guy Flick's a wizard on the mat, and if he can get the fight down to the mat, he's going to have a lot of opportunities. A bet that I'm going to be looking out for, well, two bets. First, just the under. I was able to get it earlier today at minus 120, but secondly, Flick first round submission. I feel like that's his path to victory, but if not, I feel like he kind of falls off a cliff and Charles Johnson eventually puts it on him and finishes him there. So I like Johnson, Weezy, but like a lot of these fights, I'm not laying minus 310 on him, and I definitely wasn't laying minus 550 on him last week.
Yeah, and stylistically, this one screams under. It just screams under, right? Striker versus grappler. We love that for under bets because whether the fight's standing or on the ground, one of the fighters is going to have a big advantage over the other one. Number two, Jimmy Flick goes balls out for submission. So he's liable to get tired. And Charles Johnson is a very slow starter, but he's an extremely fast finisher. You want to talk about a guy that gets better as the fight goes on? It's Charles Johnson. And Flick is the opposite of that. So, I mean, fight doesn't go to decision for this Johnson-Flick fight is a fantastic look, as is the under 2.5 here. But this is pure striker versus grappler. And in Johnson, you have a guy that's never actually been finished in his career and never been subbed. But Jimmy Flick's a little bit different, man. I mean, when you're locking up flying triangles at the UFC level, your grappling is something that's going to be a problem for a lot of people because people with that level of submission acumen, they don't need to get takedowns. They can pull guard. They can get your back standing. They can just get you in a scramble. So it's a very fascinating fight, but it's a pure striker versus grappler matchup here. If Flick is unable to take down Johnson, he's going to have a whole heap of trouble here. And Flick, while being a good submission grappler, he's not Muhammad Makayev in the wrestling. Let's face it. And even a guy like Nurmagomedov, who's really good at winning some minutes in the clinch with his takedowns, didn't win enough minutes to get the nod against Charles Johnson. So you got to believe that this fight finishes inside the distance. You got to believe it's Flick by submission early or Charles Johnson by knockout late. I mean, I think Charles Johnson by third round knockout is a great prop bet for this week because when you watch these Johnson fights, he does start slow. He is a guy that has really fantastic conditioning. That Olympic sign that's tattooed on his back has nothing to do with boxing or any combat sports. This dude was running steeplechase, and it was his dream to be an Olympic steeplechase runner. So for those of you who know what steeplechase is, that those guys don't get to the Olympic level without having bonkers conditioning. And Johnson has exactly that. So, yeah, fight doesn't go to decision. Definitely one of my favorite bets of the week, Brady. But, yeah, you got to believe that it's either Flick by sub earlier or Johnson by knockout late. But both of these guys have a path. So where the line is at right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, even if you're on that Johnson side, the Flick by submission look is probably worth it. 88% of this guy's 16 professional wins are by submission. That's 14 out of 16. I mean, that's only 2 decision victories in this guy's career. So very interesting fight. Good to see Jimmy Flick back after retiring a couple of years ago. Can't wait to see this dude fight again.
Yep, me too. Very exciting fighter. And yeah, I mean, these odds, I mean, if we're talking like who has the most hilarious haircut, then sure, Charles Johnson should be minus 310, minus 1,000 even, because his haircut has to be the most hilarious haircut in the UFC. I mean, I can't think of a more hilarious one.
There's some head scratchers. Zhu Rong coming out with pink hair not too long ago. It's gonna say like, well, what's up with this guy? I mean, what is he thinking? But youth is wasted on the young, and Zhu Rong's just a kid. But I mean, you're his age. I don't see you dyeing your hair pink. So it's all about decisions. And Charles Johnson has clearly made some bad ones with his haircut, but his striking is excellent. His conditioning is excellent. Dude's never been finished, so we can't really question his durability either. So I see why he's the favorite here. Flick coming off a big layoff is something to be concerned about as well. But as this line just gets wider and wider, Flick by sub is probably worth a sprinkle.
Yeah, and even better, Flick by first round sub. I'm going to keep my eye on that, see what it is. Maybe it's like something crazy, like maybe on FanDuel or something.
Yeah, that'll be a good look as well, because Johnson is just, his conditioning is so good that, and we haven't seen Flick show good conditioning yet, so it's going to be interesting.
Yes, sir. All right, let us keep moving on. We have Dan Argueta going against Isaac Dalgarian. We'll start with Argueta here. He is 29 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach. Dalgarian, 26 years old, 5'7". Dalgarian is making his debut here. He is 5-0, going against Argueta, who is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. And he is in his last fight, he took on Damon Jackson, I believe on short notice, up a weight class, and he did lose that fight by decision. I had a pretty big bet on Damon Jackson. I was kind of sweating towards the end there. I don't know what was going on with Jackson that night, but he looked like tired in the 3rd round. But yeah, I just recently watched tape on Dalgarian before the show. It took me like 10 minutes because this guy's not been out of the 1st round. But I mean, from everything I see, he looks really good. He's very explosive. He has a solid submission game, and his ground and pound is devastating. The only problem is he just hasn't fought anybody. But everything else really checks out. So this should be a very fun fight here. I see that the line is closing a lot on this fight. Argueta was a huge favorite. Now it's coming down a little bit. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one, Weezy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating fight because this kid Dalgarian's got 5 pro fights and 4 amateur fights. Never once has this dude been out of the 1st round, not once. And you don't see that at bantamweight very often. But the other thing is that he was fighting in FAC, and he's a James Krause pupil. And, it's been a minute since we've been here, but there are some allegations that James Krause might be a little bit shady. Now, I don't want to spend time filling everybody in on this, but turns out, sometimes when you're in James Krause's gym and FAC is James Krause's promotion, that you're going to get favorable matchups that allow you to be able to pad your record a little bit. And that's exactly what's happened with Dalgarian. One of his fights, I think it might have been the Jesse Ebrecht fight. Dalgarian was beating him up so bad, and this guy Ebrecht had so little for Dalgarian that Dalgarian stopped and asked the referee, would you please stop the fight? This was 25 seconds into the fight, and it was stopped shortly thereafter. So this guy has not beaten anybody. But when you watch the tape, man, he is doing exactly to these tomato cans what you would hope a good fighter would do, which is he's getting them out of there in the very 1st round. I was telling you as backstage before we started this show, I've never seen anybody get up after Dalgarian takes them down, and I've never seen him not finish a fight after he takes you down, whether it's with a rear naked choke or whether it's with ground and pound. This dude is finishing people. But you watch the tape on Argueta, and other than that Diego Silva split decision win for Argueta, it's all pretty fucking impressive. I think he lost the first 2 rounds to Tercios in the Tough House, but at the same time, that was a close fight. So I think that this kid Argueta has definitely got a lot of growing to do, and I think that there's a lot of potential here. Both of these guys are small featherweights. They're both short featherweights, 5'7". That's a number you usually see on flyweights in terms of height. And these guys are, fighting at 145 here. Neither one of them is particularly experienced, but it's Argueta who has a lot more cage time. It's Argueta who's fought the much better brand of competition. And frankly, Dan Argueta does well what Isaac Dalgarian does well. And we've seen Dalgarian fight no good competition, and we've seen Argueta in there with Tercios, with Damon Jackson, and with some decent regional scene competition. It's certainly much better than what Dalgarian has seen thus far. So if you're taking that shot on Dalgarian at plus money, plus about 160, 170, believe me, I get it. What you see on tape from Dalgarian is excellent, and it's dominant. So, but this is a huge step up in competition here, and Argueta has been in there with much better grapplers than what Dulgarian's been in there with. So I'm leaning Argueta here. I think he probably does get the job done, but this kid Dulgarian's a very interesting prospect.
Yeah, I mean, I was extremely impressed, and then you go look at the records of these guys, like 0-0, 1-1, 2-1. So it's one of those tough situations there. What I kind of like, Weezy, is the under, just due to the fact that Dulgarian, he's literally never seen a second round ever. So what does his cardio look like outside of the first couple minutes? We don't know. And like you said, he's a very, very good finisher. And if he does get to that second round and kind of fall off a cliff, Argueta could finish him there. So I was shocked to see the under was at plus money here, plus 115 for the under 2.5, just based on the fact that Dulgarian's never seen a second.
Well, I was shocked too, so shocked that I bet it, Brady. I've got 1 unit on it at plus 115, and I'm thinking about adding more. Dulgarian's never even seen a second round, much less 2.5 minutes into a third round. It's a UFC debut for him, and frankly, both of these guys are good on the ground. When you see those Myron Santos and Rodney Mandala fights for Argueta after he was out of the house, he had lost to Tercios. So he had kind of went back to the regional scene to kind of build up his record. And, he went through these dudes like a hot knife through butter. Then he ran into a little bit of problems there with Diego Silva. It wasn't a good performance. And on the heels of that, like you, Brady, I had a bet on Damon Jackson. And I was like, man, Argueta on short notice taking a fight against, a guy of Damon Jackson's caliber. I rate Damon Jackson very highly. He's a very good UFC fighter. Good cardio, solid striking, excellent submission grappling. Argueta really handled that situation very well. So if you ignore the Diego Silva fight, he should win this pretty easily. But this kid Dulgarian's got a ceiling. And I liked what I've seen from him so far, but this is a huge step up in competition. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Yep, and just another reason I like the under. 11 out of 13 of their wins have come by finish. And like you said, Dulgarian had 4 amateur fights, right? And those were finishes as well in the first round.
Yeah, all first round. I mean, he's never seen a second round. I mean, so this kid could be just one of these guys that kind of gets in early, but then it turns out that he's ready, that he's UFC ready. The grappling seems to be there, but this is a huge, huge step up for Dulgarian. So, I love the under 2.5 at plus money. That makes no sense. Of course, it could go over, just like anything in MMA, I mean, nothing's a lock, but the analytics love that. Killer be killed fighter. Both of these guys, actually, and, you're getting a plus money number.
Yeah, we'll see if Peterson's reffing, then it is going over. But if you got like Tyone, then it should be good.
Yeah, and MMA Prodigy says Damon's solid striking. Yeah, Damon's got solid striking. Go watch his tape. I mean, like the guy uses his conditioning as a weapon. I mean, Jonathan Pierce doesn't have the best technical striking, but he drops people because he has volume, because he has the conditioning, because he walks forward. And just because you're getting knocked out by Ilya Topuria, it doesn't mean you can't strike with somebody named Isaac Dulgarian.
Yes, sir. All right. Let us keep moving on. We have an interesting one. We have Alan Nascimento going against Carlos Hernandez. We got Nascimento, 31 years old, 5'9" with a 69-inch reach. Hernandez, 29 years old, 5'8" with a 67-inch reach. Hernandez, 2 years younger. It's going to be Nascimento with a 1-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage. Nascimento is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He fought Paiva on the Contender Series and lost that fight by decision. Made his debut against Tagir Ulanbekov, lost that fight by split decision, and then he won a decision against Jake Hadley his last time out as a pretty big dog in that fight. Hernandez is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against Victor Altamirano and won that fight by split decision. Like I was talking about earlier, like this line right off the bat is just kind of crazy. Like Nascimento's like minus 410 on some books, minus 450 on some books, and I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like Nascimento should not be this big of a favorite against anybody. I feel like he has a solid skill set, and that skill is a very, very good grappler. But, Hernandez, his takedown defense, it doesn't look great to me. He's been taken down a lot. On the Contender Series, he was taken down 5 times, but when he's getting taken down, he's popping back up. I feel like Nascimento should win this fight, but it's a price thing for me. I can't touch minus 400 on Nascimento. I do think he gets takedowns here, and when he does get those takedowns, it's his world. He's a phenomenal grappler, but just don't. I mean, I'm not in the business of laying minus 400 on this guy, so it's gonna be a pass for me, Weezy. But any thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you just said. Hernandez is a little bit younger, but this guy Nascimento is a huge flyweight, 5'9", 69-inch reach, and he's got legit grappling, and he spends so much of his time in grappling positions for or against, and that's even without the Paiva numbers. With that fight being an early contender series fight, we don't have control time numbers for it. So I'm pretty sure Nascimento is maybe spending about 80% of his UFC cage time in grappling positions for or against. So I kind of see why he's the favorite here. He's more experienced. He's taller. He's got that 2-inch reach advantage. He's got 16 more professional fights, about 150 more minutes in the pro cage, and he's got 15 more minutes in the UFC cage. Both of these guys are pretty much finishing fights only by submission. Hernandez has 1 knockout. Nascimento has 0. But guess what, dude? 34 combined professional fights for these guys. Neither one of these guys has ever been finished. So you got to like the over 2.5. You got to like the fight goes to decision here as potential spots to look at. While this is on the feet, I think Carlos Hernandez has nice striking. Nascimento is so big and long for the division that his striking looks very good too. He's a shoot box guy. So he's very well-rounded, but he definitely prefers to grapple. But this line makes no sense to me, Brady, because check this out. This is where I think the crux of the stats are, right? Alan Nascimento, 25 professional fights. In decisions, he's 4 wins and 6 losses. So, less than 500 in decisions when he's winning, almost 80% of his pro fights. Carlos Hernandez is 4-1 in decisions, right? And you got 2 guys that have never been finished here. So Nascimento is a guy, and we can prove this by watching the tape, where if you want to take him down, he's happy to lay on his back and look for submissions. And if he doesn't get them, he's going to give up minutes. He's going to potentially lose enough minutes to lose a decision. And how do you lay minus 410 on a guy who's got a worse record in decisions than Hernandez does, when Hernandez might very well be the better striker? And then here's the crux of it, right? Carlos Hernandez has only landed 2 takedowns on 17 attempts at the UFC level. However, he's given up 6 takedowns, right? So for every 1 takedown Hernandez has gotten, he's given up 3. But Hernandez has 21% control time for, and he's only allowed 12%, right? So he's been very efficient. Even though he gets taken down more than he takes down his opponents, he's out-controlling his opponents. Now, Nascimento only has 3 takedowns, and he's given up 5. But Nascimento has 21.5% control time for, and he's given up 35% control time. So Nascimento has not been efficient on the ground. He fishes for a lot of submissions. He's going to look to sweep. He's going to look to go for submissions, but he might not look to get back up. And if he doesn't convincingly win the minutes on the feet here, I think Carlos Hernandez by decision, which you might be able to get around plus 400, plus 500 this week, is a very good look, very astute look to get a big plus money number on a fight that probably does go to decision, probably 7 out of 10 times. And then you've got a guy in Hernandez who's been more efficient winning minutes on the ground, has popped up when he's gotten taken down, has gotten control time when he gets takedowns himself. I think it's a very interesting look, Carlos Hernandez by decision this week.
Yeah, right now that is plus 480 there on 5 dimes. And I'm actually, I don't know, money came in on the under. It looks like the over 2.5 opened up minus 210. It's now minus 175. So people are thinking this fight might potentially finish. I'm kind of with you, though. I think this fight does go to decision more often than not. I mean, these guys just don't get finished. Both guys very tough. I think the fight goes is a pretty good spot. The over 2.5 is a pretty good spot as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We just broke it down and the reasons why we do think that this goes, because neither one of these guys has ever been finished in their career. And like we said, that's 34 professional fights. And then you've got guys who are primarily looking for submissions, but neither one has ever been submitted. And I know that Carlos Hernandez has got a good. And here's the other thing that I think that people don't realize about Carlos Hernandez, Brady. The amateur career on this kid, he's fought everybody. Carlos Hernandez has wins as an amateur fighter over a couple of UFC fighters in Jose Johnson. He's got a win over Charles Johnson, who we just talked about, who's going to be fighting Jimmy Flick. He beat Jose Johnson on the regional, on the amateur scene. He beat Charles Johnson on the amateur scene. He beat one of YouTube's top cappers who made $1 million last year on BKFC, one Brandon Olivas, Brady. Carlos Hernandez beat him on the regional scene. So even though we've got a guy who's only got 8 professional fights and he's on a 7-fight winning streak as a professional, his only pro loss came to Gustavo Ballart in his debut. This is a guy who has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 wins as an amateur. So if you think that he's at a huge experience disadvantage here to Nascimento, if you look a little bit deeper into the stats, man, Carlos Hernandez has been around. And I mean, I just think that decision line is so fat. There's no question I'm going to be on that decision line for about a half unit this week, just because this guy's probably could be the better minute winner here. And neither one of these guys gets finished. So at plus 500, a 16.67% implied probability, that's something I have to do.
Yeah, why not? And even like the decision only could be something as well. So yeah, I mean, this line, it looks like it's coming down a little bit. Looks like money just came in on Hernandez. So Nascimento went from minus 425 to now minus 325. So I mean, it shouldn't be minus 400.
It's so wide. It's crazy wide. But Nascimento did look fantastic against Hadley.
Yeah, beating Hadley aged very well, and I think it's going to continue to age very, very well. So I gotta give him props for that one.
Yeah, and then not only that, the losses were very close losses to guys like Paiva, who's now up at 135, and then prior to that, I forget the other one, but
Figueroa is pretty close.
Yeah, those were both very close fights against really good opponents. So, yeah, very fascinating fight here.
Yep, cannot wait for this one. This is a really good card. I'm really, really liking this one. All right, let us keep moving on. We have Javid Basharat going against Mateus Mendoza. We got Basharat, who is 27 years old, 5'9", with a 69-inch reach. Mendoza, he is 23 years old, 5'6", with a 71-inch reach. Basharat's 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He got a submission win on the Contender Series, beat Trevin Jones by decision, looked really good there, and then looked really good against Tony Gravely his last fight out. As far as Mendoza, he is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He had a first-round finish on the Contender Series, I think in less than a minute, and that was the fight where he was rocking the blue hair, right?
Yes.
Which I thought that looked cool. It wasn't like the Charles Johnson green hair thing, so I'll give him props for that. But yeah, Weezy should be a very good fight. This matchmaking is kind of weird to me because Javid's a guy that he has a ton of hype. He looks very good. And the same thing with Mendoza. He looks very good. He's super well-rounded. I believe he trains at the same gym as Charles Oliveira. I would think that they would maybe want to build Mendoza up a little bit, give him somebody a little bit easier here. And I would also think that they would want to kind of push Javid a little bit more, considering he just beat Tony Gravely, who's a very good fighter. So the matchmaking is kind of weird here, but 2 very, very good fighters, 2 undefeated fighters. Cannot wait for this fight. I think it's one of the better fights on the prelims here.
Yeah, and this particular matchmaking has me very intrigued about the prospects of Mendoza, right? Because for Basharat, we really hadn't seen him fight anybody coming into the Contender Series. And then he comes into the Contender Series and he fights. I mean, if you look at the definition of tomato can in the dictionary, you're going to see a picture of Moron Calon, the guy that he beat on the Contender Series. A complete tomato can with a big mouth. If you like seeing a big mouth moron get the shit kicked out of him, please go watch that fight. But look, he gets a win over Trevin Jones and then Tony Gravely, both by unanimous decision, both clean wins. There was no doubt about it. So Basharat putting those 2 wins back to back is very impressive. And it's even more impressive that they think enough of Mateus Mendoza to match him up against a guy in Basharat who is a little more experienced with 3 more pro fights, who is a little more experienced with 15 more minutes in the pro cage, 2 more fights at the UFC level, and about 43 more minutes in the UFC cage. And in addition to that, Basharat is very well-rounded. We've seen him have the ability to take people down and win minutes on the ground. We've seen him do very well in the clinch. And we've seen him have very clean distance striking where he's winning minutes against guys like Gravely, who are very difficult to deal with because you have to worry about the takedown threat there. And in addition to that, Basharat was cleanly winning minutes at distance after about the first 2.5 minutes of that fight, which is when Gravely probably had the most success. But this dude Mendoza, if you go and you watch the Pedro Nobre fight, Brady, that was the fight that he had before the Contender Series. Now, Nobre is like 21-5 as a pro. He's been around. He took that fight when Mateus Mendoza was 21 years old. He took that fight against Nobre, who was 34 and had about 30 professional fights. And I was telling you, man, he wins the first round with clinch control. He wins the second round by winning at distance and then getting takedowns in the second half of the round, and his wrestling looks good. And then in the third round, he just boxes this dude up on the feet and beats him there. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, this kid's 21, and he's showing a complete skill set against a guy in Pedro Nobre who's been around the block, who's fought at the top level of the Brazilian regional scene. And I think he might have even fought in the UFC some years back. So, I think that this kid Mendoza's got a very high ceiling. So this is another line where it feels too wide because Mendoza is a very good prospect, but we've seen a lot from Basharat. The win over Gravely, the win over Trevin Jones are both high-rated wins in my opinion. And I'm not seeing a lot of holes in Basharat's game. So while I feel that the betting line, the value is on the Mendoza side at close to plus 300, I still see Javid getting the win here because he's well-rounded, because he hasn't shown a lot of holes in his game, and because he seems to get better as the fight goes on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Mendoza has a really high ceiling, man. This guy is good. He's well-rounded. His striking solid, lots of power, good wrestling. His jiu-jitsu is insane as well. It's just one big problem. He's fighting Javid Basharat. So I'm kind of upsetting about the matchmaking. I would like to see him build him up a little bit, but he'll bounce back from this. I think Javid does win the fight. I think Javid showed me a lot in the Gravely fight. I wasn't expecting him to go out there and out-wrestle Tony Gravely, one of the best wrestlers in the division. And after that fight, he was like, I told you I'm the better wrestler. I was like, okay, yeah, apparently you are. Wow. So that really opened up my eyes there. And like you said, the striking of Javid. So I got to go Javid here as well, but he's a big favorite. He opened up minus 260. He's currently minus 360. Mendoza opened up plus 220. He is currently plus 285. Over-unders a pick him at minus 115. I don't really have a strong lean one way or another. Javid had a 100% finish rate before coming into the UFC, but since he got to the UFC, hasn't finished either Gravely or Jones there, and Mendoza's never been finished. So I guess I would lean fight goes to decision, Javid by decision, but I think Mendoza is definitely going to have some moments here in this fight.
Yeah, for me, this is one where the time props, I'm not even interested in them at all because I could see this going either way. I could see either fighter getting a finish. I could see this going to decision because both fighters, not only have they never lost, but how can you get finished if you've never lost? So it's hard to know whether these guys are going to be able to finish each other, but these are two really good prospects here. So like you said, Brady, even if Mendoza loses this one, this kid's only 23 years old. He's training at shoot box. And like I said, it looks like he's putting together a complete mixed martial arts game here. So if I were to bet a money line on this, it would definitely be Mendoza just because of the number. But, this kid Basharat's the real deal. And you look at the numbers here that he's put up at the UFC level, man, they're very impressive. And they're very impressive against guys that are very good in this division. These are not entry-level fights against Gravely and Trevin Jones. So Basharat's done everything that you would expect him to do as an excellent prospect.
Yep, Tony Gravely is definitely not a bum. That is for sure.
That's for sure, man.
Trevin Jones either. All right, moving on, we have two newcomers here in this matchup. We have Mateusz Rebecki going against Nick Fiore. Rebecki, he is 30 years old, 5'7" with a 66-inch reach. Fiore, he is 25 years old, or Fiore, 25 years old, 5'11", and not sure on the reach there. Rebecki, he is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He had a submission win on the Contender Series in the first couple minutes there. And then Fiore, he is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. Weezy, I go to watch tape on Fiore, and there's one fight, and you'll never guess who it's against. It's my man.
I know who it's against, man. It's
my man.
We've seen everybody beat. Before you get into the UFC, everybody has to beat Jay Ellis, because he'll fight at any weight class. He'll fight on 6 seconds notice, and he will go in there and take a quick loss. And not only did he take 1 loss, but he took 2 losses against Nick Fiore. His 2 first pro fights were both against Jay Ellis. The rematch that nobody wanted, nobody asked for, but it happened anyway.
Yeah, it was funny. I was watching the Ellis fight, and the announcers were like hyping up Jay Ellis. They were like, "Oh yeah, this guy has like 100 fights. That's double Cowboy Cerrone. You better watch out for this guy." And then he gets submitted like 2 seconds later. I mean, the
guy clearly didn't know who he was. You know,
this guy has 100 fights, more than Donald Cerrone. It was hilarious, but I mean, that's all we got. That's all we got with this Fiore guy. I've not seen any other footage. What does that show me against Jay Ellis? What does that show me? Nothing. Right off the bat, Rebecki's a minus 700 favorite here. Minus 725 and growing. I think, I was able to watch a good amount of tape on Rebecki. I do remember him from the Contender Series. This guy is very good. I think his striking solid, but it's his grappling that is very, very good as well. I think it should be Rebecki here. And Fiore is another guy that I don't think has ever been out of the first round. I can double check, but probably another good violent spot as well. Earlier today, I think BetOnline made a mistake. I think they put the over-under at 2.5 with the under at like minus 105. I'm not sure if that was a real line. But now it's at 1.5, and the under 1.5 is minus 105. I don't know. I think it should be Rebecki all day here. No hot take for me. Just on top of that, just wasn't able to see enough of Fiore. I mean, like I said, Jay Ellis just shows me nothing. So Rebecki, I think, is the real deal, though, and he should get this win.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, for some reason, the tape index only has that Jay Ellis fight. But when you type Nick Fiore into YouTube, you can find some of the amateur fights. And he actually has an amateur fight against the anabolic Arab, one Ali Zebian, who's been around. He's a decent guy. Choked him out in the very first round. So Fiore does have some amateur wins that are decent. He's 5-1 as an amateur. He's got 3 first-round wins and 2 second-round wins, and then he lost by slam, literally like a Ricardo Arona being knocked out by Quentin Rampage Jackson slam. That's his only loss as a pro or an amateur. But yeah, man, I mean, even though he's fighting at the New England Cartel, the wins as a pro are against guys with 19 losses, 13 losses, 4 losses, 9 losses, and then Jay Ellis had 98 losses in the second fight and 91 in the first, and which is kind of funny because that means between January of 2020 and August of 2021, Jay Ellis found a way to lose 7 more fights. So this guy is getting in there and losing a lot, but Fiore's not bad. Don't sleep on this guy. Let's not forget the last guy to come in as a Polish prospect that was supposed to roll was a guy named Michael Figlak, and he lost to Fares Zion. These Polish regional scene guys, they don't face great competition before they come into the UFC. But a guy like Rebecki, he does have a lot of experience, and the guys that he's fighting on that regional scene really are the top regional scene guys. So he's definitely fought better competition than Fiore, and his ground game is good. But what worries me the most for Fiore in this spot is the way that Rebecki sets up his takedowns. And it's the best way if you're a good wrestler and a grappler. Throw an overhand right with very bad intentions. If it lands, you knock your opponent out. If it doesn't, you're in on a double leg. And that's just what this guy does. He sets it up with the jab. The jab comes nice and easy. The overhand right comes with really bad intentions, and he's stumbling into your hips with that overhand right, whether it hits you or not. So I do see Rebecki getting the takedowns here. I do see him controlling Fiore on the ground, getting ground and pound, potentially getting an early submission here. Nick Fiore has never been to decision in his entire career, and he's never been past 1.5 rounds either. So I do like Ribeiro because we see that Ribeiro has got an 88% finish rate in his 16 wins, and he's been finished in his only loss. So Fiore-Ribeiro violence, I think, is a great way to play this. And even the under 1.5 is probably the best way to play because we've never seen Fiore get past 1.5 rounds. He's taking this fight on short notice, and it's his UFC debut, and it's against a much more experienced opponent.
Yeah, I'll be looking at some violence here. Like I said, the under 1.5 around -105. I'm curious to see where the fight doesn't get the decision, opens up at. But yeah, most importantly though, get some help, Jay Ellis. I mean, this is bad. 16 and what is he now? 16 and 106.
Yeah, and he's got 106 losses, man. I mean, just going through life as an 80-year-old man and taking 106 separate losses over 80 years of life is more than most people can take. This guy's had less than an 8-year mixed martial arts career and lost 106 fights in violent ways. Let's all pray for Jay Ellis and hope for the best and hope that he gets some help, Brady.
I think he might have got some help, man. He has not fought since August of last year. Against a 0-0 Scott Gibbons.
Scott Gibbons, huh? Wow. Well, did Gibbons get the win?
Oh, of course.
Well,
probably in the first round by knockout too.
Well, it's hopefully we got a bright future for Gibbons, and hopefully Jay Ellis' future will be a lot brighter when he stops taking fights.
Oh, he should have stopped a long time ago. But
I agree.
All right, get some help, Jay Ellis. All right, we'll keep moving on. We have a very fun fight here. Abdul Razak Alhassan going against Claudio Ribeiro. We got Alhassan, 37 years old, 5'10" with a 73-inch reach. Ribeiro, 30 years old, 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. Alhassan is 7 years older. He's going to be at a 3-inch height disadvantage and a 4-inch reach disadvantage. Tail the tape in favor of Ribeiro there. Ribeiro is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He won by knockout on the Contender Series with a nasty, I think it was like a spinning back fist, completely destroyed Venezuela. Nasty knockout there. And then as far as Abdul Razak Alhassan, he is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. A decision loss to Munir Lazez, a knockout loss to Chaos Williams, a decision loss to Malkoun, a knockout win against Alessio Di Chirico, and a decision loss to Joaquin Buckley. Weezy, I mean, I think Abdul Razak Alhassan is one of your biggest enemies, right? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
It's, I'm my own enemy because I can't stop betting on this man's fights when I get them wrong every single time. And all that being said, Brady, I like Abdul Razak Alhassan here. You're just going to have to talk me out of betting this fight because when you watch what's available on tape here, this guy Ribeiro is probably actually the worst grappler in this matchup. And when we've seen Alhassan really get beat up, it's been when he hasn't been able to land that first round knockout. It's when his opponents have been able to get the takedowns, hold him down, like what Malkoun did to him, kind of like what Munir Lazez did to him. So we've seen a lot of people have success wrestling Abdul Razak Alhassan. He's given up 24 takedowns in 10 fights. He's giving up 36.23% control time against, and he's allowing 5.11 takedowns per 15 minutes. But with Claudio Ribeiro, we don't have to worry about that. Ribeiro is one of these Brazilian dudes that loves to dance, right? He's kind of got those Michel Pereira moves. This dude can legit dance. And good dancers have good hips, Brady. Whether it's a female or whether it's a male, it's about turning those hips to seductively show off your body while you're dancing, right? But also, whether you're swinging a golf club, whether you're swinging a baseball bat, or whether you're swinging a right hook or a left hook, it's those hip turns that bring the power, right? And that's what Ribeiro does. Whether it's on the feet for Ribeiro or whether it's on the feet for Alhassan, these guys are both incredibly dangerous. They both carry a lot of power. And when one of them is pressuring, they're usually finishing fights with their power strikes, getting their opponents backed up, whether it's Ribeiro backing up his opponents or whether it's Alhassan backing up his opponents. The second you take a backward step against either of these guys, you're going to be in trouble. you're going to be in danger of getting knocked out. So, I do see this fight probably finishing inside the distance, probably under 1.5. But with Alhassan being a black belt in judo and Claudio Ribeiro actually giving up a ton of minutes in wrestling exchanges, in clinch exchanges, you see this guy getting held up against the cage and really having no answer for it. I could see this being a sneaky over 1.5 round bet, because if Alhassan decides that he wants to do to Ribeiro what Jacob Malkoun did to him 3 fights ago, you might see Alhassan actually winning minutes in this fight. But if Alhassan just wants to prove that he's the better striker here, somebody's probably getting slept in the first 60 seconds, because both of these guys have crazy power. And if either one of them lands, somebody's going to probably go to the hospital in a lot of pain. So it's going to be interesting to see if Alhassan has learned anything at 37 years old, if he's grown in his mixed martial arts journey, if he's figured out how to win a fight outside of getting a knockout in the very first round, which is how all 11 of his professional wins have come, by first round knockout. Let's see if Abdul Razak Alhassan has grown. Because if he has, this fight might actually go over 1.5 rounds. And Alhassan might use his clinch control and his judo in order to win minutes here. But if he doesn't go to that, somebody's getting slept in the very first round here, because these guys, they both hit like they're carrying a roll of nickels in their fist.
Yeah, I personally lean towards they're just going to stand and bang until one man falls. I mean, I would like Alhassan to do that. It's just not something he's ever done. But yeah, to be, like you said, it'd be smart, because Ribeiro has a huge hole in his game. This was one I researched, one of the very first fights I researched a couple weeks ago. And one thing I had circled, my favorite play of the week was the under 1.5.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Minus 245.
Yeah.
Minus 245. So yeah, this is a fight I won't be betting on. I think the under would have been a good look, but they're on it and more. It even opened up at like minus 170. Even that, I'm like, come on. So
yeah. And check it out, Brady. I mean, you look at these numbers, they're actually comical. Knockdowns per 15 minutes. Abdul Razak averaging 1.5 knockdowns per 15 minutes, but Claudio Ribeiro averaging 36 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He's only landed 4 significant strikes, and one of them was such a horrific left hook that talk about a chin spinner. Poor Valenzuela, man. It looked like his head was going to come off when he got hit with that left hook. It reminded me of what Jeremiah Wells did to Court McGee. That was nasty. But if you're right, if these guys just stand and bang, you might as well just bet that somebody gets finished in the first 60 seconds.
60-second bet. Okay, I might. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. Fight doesn't go to decision, minus 320. That's not horrible, as a parlay piece. I'd be kind of shocked if this fight did see the distance. I think both guys have a 100% finish rate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they both have a 100% finish rate, and neither one of them has shown a lot of ability to wrestle and wrestle successfully. So, I mean, every second that this fight stays on the feet, it would be terrifying to have an over bet.
Yeah, it'd be a pretty big sweat there. But yeah, it should be a good fight. I don't know if I'll be betting on this one, though, since the books are all over that under. All right, we'll move on to probably one of the best fights on the entire card. We have Umar Nurmagomedov going against Raoni Barcelos. We got Nurmagomedov, 26 years old, 5'8", with a 69-inch reach. Barcelos, 35 years old, 5'7", with a 67-inch reach. Nurmagomedov, 9 years younger, 1-inch height advantage, and a 2-inch reach advantage. Nurmagomedov is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against, I believe it was Sergey Morozov, won by submission against Brian Kelleher, and then just recently beat Nate Maness by decision. As far as Barcelos, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, a decision win against Said Nurmagomedov, a decision win against Khalid Taha, a decision loss against Tamir Valiev, a decision loss to Victor Henry, and then a decision win against Trevin Jones. So yeah, this is we got a crazy line. We see Nurmagomedov is the second biggest favorite on the card. He opened up minus 200. He is currently minus 700. Barcelos opened up plus 170, and it's currently plus 498. And it's crazy seeing a guy, in the caliber of Barcelos at this big of a price tag. And Bootsy's liking Barcelos as well. But man, Barcelos, he's a very good striker. He has a ton of volume. He has good power. He has phenomenal wrestling. His takedown defense is on point at 93%. I believe it's like a 3rd-degree black belt. His jiu-jitsu is insane as well. Just a very well-rounded fighter. The only problem with Barcelos at this point is, he is getting up there in age. He's 35 years old at bantamweight. That's getting up there. The cardio's kind of been an issue. He does tend to slow down a bit as the fight goes on. And then the other problem is he's fighting Umar Nurmagomedov here. It's one of those fights where I think this line is so off, but it's just hard to pick against Umar Nurmagomedov. Like, he's 9 years younger. But I feel like this could be a very, very competitive fight, at least early on. But as the fight goes on, I do kind of worry about Barcelos, especially if there's a lot of wrestling, a lot of grappling, and how his cardio does hold up. So it's a spot where I like Nurmagomedov as far as the pick goes, but I'm curious to see where this line goes. Like, even like minus 500, I thought was kind of crazy for Nurmagomedov, but here he's sitting at minus 700. I think that's a lot of disrespect towards Barcelos, who's a phenomenal fighter, and it's going to be the toughest test of Nurmagomedov's career by a mile. I mean, Barcelos is not Nate Beness. Barcelos is not Brian Kelleher. Barcelos is not Sergey Morozov. So it's a legit test for Umar, and he's getting a ton of respect on the line, Weezy.
He is. And I mean, as he should. I mean, this kid, there's hard to poke any holes in this kid's game. But, as somebody who's been betting this for a minute, like you have, Brady, you remember seeing Hani Barcelos as a minus 1,100 favorite over Carlos Huachin. You couldn't find Hani Barcelos at minus 500 or better, and in any of his fights except for against Said Nurmagomedov, even against Victor Henry and Timur Valiev, that he was minus 300 and he lost those fights. You're never this year in 2023. My prediction is that you will never see a mixed martial artist of Hani Barcelos' caliber sniff anywhere close to plus 500. Okay? And then on the other side of that, you got a guy in Umar who in 3 UFC fights and 27 minutes in the UFC cage has absorbed 10 significant strikes. 10 in 3 fights. And 2 of these fights one of these fights went to decision. I mean, it's just another level of dominance. And his coach is the best UFC fighter maybe of all time, a guy who retired undefeated as a champion, something that we've never seen, Brady. Not once have we seen somebody come in, stay undefeated, and then retire undefeated as a champion. Nobody came close to beating this guy. And that's his coach. That's his cousin, We just saw Islam Makhachev make it look so easy against Charles Oliveira, as if they weren't even in the same weight class and they weren't anywhere near each other in skills. So this is a fascinating fight. It's by far the highest level fight on this card, because Umar might even be favored against Aljamain Sterling at this point. Like if you were to, say, I'm going to be the backup. Let's say he finishes Barcelos in the first here. He could say, I'm going to be backup, for just in case either one of these guys doesn't make weight for the next Aljamain Sterling fight. And he would probably be the favorite. So it's a fascinating fight. You got a guy in Umar Nurmagomedov who may never lose as a pro. And then you got him being by far his toughest test. You're never going to see Hani Barcelos at plus 500 against anybody else in this division, even if he was 42 years old, So it's a fascinating fight. But this kid, Umar, is absolutely special. He's like these dominant Dagestanis. His wrestling and his defense are something that's just unbelievable. How do you win a fight when you can't take down your opponent or hurt him or land a strike? Well, that's what Nurmagomedov did. That's what Makhachev has done. And that's what Umar Nurmagomedov is doing. And so it's going to be really interesting to see him against, a really well-rounded, really talented mixed martial artist here in Hani Barcelos. I can't wait for this fight. I'm picking Nurmagomedov, but I think I might have to put a bet on Barcelos, even if it's very small at plus 500, because you just don't get a mixed martial artist of that quality at that price ever.
Yeah, never. Curious to see where the line goes. Like I said, he opened up minus 200, went to minus 500, we went to minus 600, 625, and now minus 700. I'm curious to see if it gets any wider than that, and I imagine it might.
It could. This kid is just unbelievable. Nobody does anything to him. I mean, even on the regional scene, what he did to Said Yakub Kakramanov, who we just saw have a really good performance against Said Nurmagomedov. got caught in a ninja choke at the end of the second round, but that can happen to anybody. Yeah, Umar is special. Really looking forward to this fight. This is such a high-level fight.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, this is just a big pass for me. I'm going to sit back, enjoy this one. Should be a very fun, high-level fight, but not betting either side there. Unless the line gets like crazy for Barcelos, then yeah, I mean, I don't know. But I think Nurmagomedov gets this done. And like you said, I think he fights for a title in the very near future. All right. Probably my least favorite fight on the card. We have Ketlen Vieira going against Raquel Pennington. We got Vieira, 31 years old, 5'8" with a 68-inch reach. Pennington, 34 years old, 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. Vieira, 3 years younger, 1-inch height advantage and a 1-inch reach advantage. Vieira is 3-2 in her last 5 fights, a knockout loss against Irene Aldana, a decision win against Ciara Eubanks, a decision loss to Yana Kunitsukaya, a decision win against Miesha Tate, and a decision win against Holly Holm. As far as Pennington, 4-1 in her last 5 fights, a decision loss to Holly Holm, a decision win against Marion Renault, a decision win against Pandy Kianzad, a submission win against Macy Chiazon, and a decision win against Aspen Ladd. First look, I thought that I might be betting Ketlen Vieira, but after looking into it, I think a pick'em's about right, just because I could see past for both fighters. I could see Pennington winning this fight in the clinch, pushing Vieira against the cage. And then on the flip side, I could see Vieira getting this fight down to the mat, winning minutes on bottom or on top. It's just a fight where I just don't really want to bet it. I stopped betting fights like these last year, and my results have skyrocketed since doing so. So yeah, pick'em seems about right to me. I would lean Vieira because I think she has more ways to win. I think at distance, she's probably the better striker. I think she has more power, but she's so low volume, though, is the thing. You know, Pennington, she's probably going to have more volume. And like I said, she can push Vieira against the cage and win those minutes there. But I do expect Vieira to get the fight down to the mat, control Pennington, and win a decision here. But it's not a fight I'm really interested in, not a fight I really want to bet on. This might be a fight where I take my chicken break. I go make my chicken dinner, my chicken and rice, and just completely miss this fight. Weezy, are you a little bit higher on this fight than I am? And do you like anything here?
Yeah, I mean, as a bettor, I see this being a very close fight. And Fight Goes is probably sitting at minus 300, over 2.5, maybe through minus 350, minus 325. And that's what I see happening here. I see this fight going to decision, but who's going to win? I mean, how the hell can you even be confident? I mean, Ketlen Vieira clearly lost to Holly Holm and got the win. Ketlen Vieira controlled Yana Kunitskaya for 11 minutes and got the loss. So it's like when Ketlen Vieira fights, I think the judges are just blinded by how identical she is to Lamas. I mean, come on, man. I mean, she looks like she should have starred in Renegade instead of Lorenzo Lamas. And when you're a judge and you're sitting sidelines and you're going and you're thinking to yourself, I still haven't met anybody that's ever been in the same room with Ketlen Vieira and Lorenzo Lamas at the same time. And then at the end of 3 rounds, somebody taps you on your shoulder and they ask you what was the score of the fight. And you're like, shit, man, I've been just thinking about how much this bitch looks like Lorenzo Lamas. I didn't even score the fight. So then you just write 10-9 in there and you get these decisions that don't make any sense. And look, Vieira got held up against the cage for something like more than half the fight by Holm. And that's what Raquel Pennington does well.
Yeah.
And so I could see this fight going either way because Pennington could win more minutes in the clinch. It could be 50-50 in the striking like the Holm-Vieira fight was, but then the judges give it to Vieira. So, yeah, this is definitely a stay away for me because I could see this definitely going either way. Both of these ladies are very good. Both of these ladies are at the top of the division, and they've both beat a bunch of good fighters. So I see it playing out very close. I see the decision, being controversial. Yeah. And I see Lorenzo Lamas every time I see Ketlen Vieira. So that's all I have for you.
Yep, and I cannot agree more. It's going to probably go to decision. It's going to probably be close, and at that point, it's in the hands of the judges. And yeah, it's terrifying.
As a gambler, that's terrifying, isn't it, Brady?
It is terrifying. So, yeah, it's about a pick'em. Vieira opened up minus 145, currently minus 116. Pennington opened up plus 125, currently minus 104. The over 2.5 minus 350. The fight goes to decision minus 300. I don't really see myself betting this fight.
Yeah, you and me both. And I mean, like, if that over wasn't juiced to the tits, I'd probably get on that. And that could be a potential parlay piece too. But I definitely see this fight going the full 3 rounds.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's move on from that. We have a very good fight here. We have Punahele Soriano going against Roman Kopylov. We got Soriano, 30 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. Kopylov, 31 years old, 6 foot with a 75-inch reach. Soriano, 1 year younger. Kopylov with a 1-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage. Soriano's 3-2 in his last 5 fights, a knockout win against Oscar Pajota, a knockout win against Dusko Todorovic, a decision loss to Brendan Allen, a decision loss to Nick Maximov, and a knockout win against Dolce Longiambula. As far as Kopylov, he is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Made his debut against Carl Roberson, lost that fight by submission. He took some time off, came back against Albert Duraev, lost that fight by decision, and then knocked out Alessio Di Chirico in his last fight out. Looked really good in that fight. So this is a fight where it's a closely lined fight here. I feel like this would be Soriano all day if I could just trust him to wrestle. I think Kopylov has a huge hole in his game. I mean, getting taken down and submitted by Carl Roberson is a terrible look. We saw what Duraev was able to do to him. If Soriano, who has a very good wrestling background, would go out there and take down Kopylov, I feel like it's an easy night here for him. He was able to do it only against Jamie Pickett, though, and that's kind of where my concern is. Soriano, he's a striker first, so he's not really going to that wrestling game all that much. And the one time I did see him do it, it was against Jamie Pickett, so I don't know how much to look into that. So if these guys do strike, though, I feel like it's a close fight. I feel like both guys have a lot of power, especially Soriano. Soriano's power is crazy, but Kopylov's striking is very good. He mixes it up very well to the body. Had those very nice kicks to the body against Alessio Di Chirico. So I feel like on the feet it could be close, but I just feel like Soriano has such an easy path to victory. With the rest, I just don't really trust him to take it. So this is kind of a close fight for me, Weezy. I'm curious to your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because Punahele Soriano is one of these guys that you kind of want to be on his side when you're betting because he looks the part. He's big, he's strong, he's got ridiculous power, and he's one of those guys that if you know what this kid's all about, that judo black belt is in his back pocket. That really good wrestling background is in his back pocket. Even in the Maximov fight, where he was wrestling for 3 full rounds, he got hurt early in that fight, but was still constantly scrambling, still constantly working back to his feet. He hasn't shown good takedown defense at the UFC level, but I think that he also hasn't been easy to win minutes off of. You have to be very relentless with the wrestling in order to win minutes off of Soriano, but that's not what Kopylov does. Kopylov is going to strike with him. And I worry about people who are saying that Soriano's path is to wrestle here because guess where Kopylov's from? He's from Russia. Go watch the tape on this dude. Everybody's trying to wrestle him, and it's not working. It doesn't work. He's got an 87.5% takedown defense at the UFC level. Albert Duraev got him down and worked him on the ground. But Punahele Soriano is not Albert Duraev. They don't have similar games. Duraev is a grappler first. Soriano is a striker that relies on his power. But seeing Soriano lose a stand-up striking match to Brendan Allen is terrifying because we can't count on this guy to wrestle. Could Punahele Soriano come out here and wrestle from minute 1 and do it successfully for 3 rounds? Sure, of course it's a possibility, but there's nothing in the tape to suggest that that's going to happen and that you should be laying juice on this guy. If you're laying juice on him, it's probably because you think he's knocking out Roman Kopylov. And because Punahele Soriano has legitimate power, 5 knockdowns in 6 UFC fights, that's crazy power. That's more power than what Kopylov has. And Kopylov tends to outlast his opponents when they can't take him down late in fights because he hits hard. He's got very heavy hands. And he's an attritional striker that kind of breaks you down later on in fights. He's not a one-punch guy. So I actually am leaning Kopylov here. I think this is a very good stylistic matchup for him because we can't count on Punahele Soriano to wrestle. And if you're thinking that he's going to go out there and outbox another southpaw, remember, this is a southpaw versus southpaw matchup. So the more experienced striker is going to be better here because Southpaws don't do well against other southpaws. They're used to matching up against orthodox fighters. So, I really could see Roman Kopylov having success here. And at the plus money number, I think it's very intriguing. But it's a close fight, Brady. I mean, even if this were to stay standing for the full 15 minutes, Soriano's got such great power that I could see him losing a bunch of minutes and then landing one big shot that changes the trajectory of the fight. So, fascinating fight. It's a fight I have no bets on thus far, but I'm really looking forward to seeing these two square off because they're both really good on the feet.
Yep, it should be a good one. And yeah, me personally, I'm leaning towards Kopylov as well. Don't think I'll bet it. Money is coming in on him though. Soriano opened up as a minus 180, currently minus 150. Kopylov opened up plus 155. He's currently plus 130. So some money is coming in on Kopylov. I also thought maybe the under, it was minus 115. That was interesting. Now minus 140. Doesn't really interest me as much. So yeah, I don't really like anything on this fight. Maybe a dog bet potentially on Kopylov, but even that's kind of terrifying against the power of Soriano.
Yeah, and maybe if you're leaning violence, Brady, you look at fight ends by KO, because neither one of these guys has ever submitted anybody. Or no, I'm sorry. Actually, Soriano does have 2 wins by submission in his career, but they were regional scene wins. Neither one of these guys has ever won a fight by submission at the UFC level, only knockouts. So, maybe that's how you play it, but neither one of these guys has ever been knocked out. So it kind of feels like a great fight to watch, but I don't know if it's a great fight to bet on.
Yeah, even the violence, I don't feel strongly on it at all. Because like I said, both guys are especially Soriano. Soriano's really, really tough.
Yeah, dude, these Hawaiian dudes, they grow up fighting, and they're tough as hell. So, yeah, these guys have been around the block. Kopylov coming from, the rough parts of Russia. Soriano growing up in Hawaii. These guys are fucking durable. So I really do see this one, being a good war, a good fun fight to watch. But I don't know if I really feel great on either side here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But we will move on to the co-main event. We have Dan Ige going against Damon Jackson. We got Dan Ige, 31 years old, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. Damon Jackson, 34 years old, 5'11" with a 71-inch reach. We have Dan Ige 3 years younger, and it's going to be Damon Jackson with a 4-inch height advantage. Dan Ige is 1-5 or 1-4 in his last 5 fights. A decision loss to Calvin Kattar, a knockout win against Gavin Tucker, a decision loss to the Korean Zombie, a decision loss to Josh Emmett, and a decision loss to Movsar Evloev. As far as Damon Jackson, he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Had a knockout loss to Ilia Topuria, had a decision win against Charles Rosa, a submission win against Camilla Kirk, a decision win against Daniel Argueta, and then probably his best win yet is Pat Sabatini first round at knockout his last time out. And he's getting a step up in competition here against Dan Ige, who's, fought guys like Evloev, guys like Emmett Zombie, guys like that. And it's a step up for Jackson. It's a very big step down in competition for Danny Ige. I see why they made this the co-main event. It's going to be a fascinating fight here. Pretty much a striker versus grappler. I know Danny Ige is a black belt in BJJ, but Damon Jackson's going to want to get this fight down to the mat. And Dan Ige is going to probably want to keep this fight on the feet. Should be a very fun one here, Weezy. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, great fight. And, there's been a lot of line movement here as, when this fight opened up, Damon Jackson was like a minus 150 favorite, which I was like, immediately when I saw it, I was like, I should just put a unit on Ige here because he's been fighting the better brand of competition. And Ige's got serious power. And Damon Jackson's been knocked out in 3 of his 4 professional losses. And he's been submitted in the other one. So Damon Jackson's been finished in all of his losses. And Dan Ige's never been finished. And then you got a guy in Jackson who's finishing 60% of his UFC wins, and Ige's finishing 50% of his UFC wins. So it's a very fascinating matchup. But both of these guys are great mixed martial artists. Like I said earlier, Damon Jackson's got underrated striking for this division because of the length that he possesses here, and because of the conditioning. And when you're worrying about your opponent wrestling, it makes your striking a little bit sneakier. And you have to worry about that grappling game with Damon Jackson because he's so aggressive with his submissions. In addition to that, Ige has got legitimate one-punch knockout power. I mean, that Gavin Tucker knockout was an absolute thing of beauty. And Tucker was probably a favorite in that fight, if I remember correctly. So, I think if this is on the feet, while Jackson's going to be good there, he's really got to worry about the fact that he's been knocked out so many times. And Ige's got a good get-up game. Look, his takedown defense is only 51%, right? And he's been controlled almost 20% of his UFC cage time. So that's 34 minutes. But that's on 21 takedowns. So it's not like this guy's getting held down for massive amounts of time. When you look at the fights, there's 13 UFC fights for Ige, and Ige's attempted 55 takedowns, and his opponents have attempted 43. So that's almost 100 takedown attempts in 13 UFC fights for Ige. So there's a ton of takedown attempts happening in these fights, yet Ige's fights only take place in control time positions about 31% of the time. So about 7 out of every 10 seconds stays standing. So while Ige might be easy to take down, he's not easy to hold down. And he's had some submissions attempted against him, but like I said, 21 professional fights, fighting guys like the Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, Evloev, Cater. He's never been finished. So it's going to be interesting. How about a finish-only prop on Dan Ige, right? Nobody's really finishing Dan Ige, but Damon Jackson's been finishing all of his losses. So I kind of feel like that's a safe look because this is a close fight on paper, because it's lined around minus 150. You might be able to get that Ige finish-only prop at decent money, and then you really only got to worry about a Damon Jackson submission. And Ige's never been finished in 21 professional fights, but Damon's hot and Danny Ige isn't. But there's definitely a level of competition difference here. Is Damon Jackson's ratio overall 1.25, Ige 1.68, and Ige's been fighting the more experienced competition overall. And when you compare the wins side by side, the ratio of wins to losses of the guys that Ige has beaten pretty much identical to the guys that Jackson's beaten. But Ige's got more experienced wins as well. So, yeah, it's a fascinating fight. Very high-level fight as well. Can't wait to watch this one. I think, the finish-only prop is the only thing that's jumping out on me now because I think that this line has went to a place where it makes a lot more sense now than where it did when it opened, even though I'm a huge Damon Jackson fan. I had the Damon Jackson under 2.5 in the Sabatini fight at plus 180, and I had Damon Jackson at plus 190 on the money line in that fight. So I'm a big fan of Damon Jackson. He's cashed me some fucking tickets recently, and he's fighting very well. So this is a great fight, great co-main event.
Yeah, it is. I remember seeing that Dan Ige plus money, and I went to tape it. Got done taping it, and the plus money was gone, man. Yeah. It was gone, and it's just been hit ever since. I mean, it went from open up plus 140, went to plus 125 to minus 115 to minus 120, minus 125, minus 130, minus 135. I really actually like Danny Ige in this matchup a lot, but man, I would have liked him a lot better as an underdog. I'm with you on that finish only. I think finish only for Dan Ige is a good look. I think the Dan Ige finish in general is a really good look as well, considering Jackson's been finishing all 4 of his losses. And I was going to come on here and do the whole is Ige a bum rant, but people are starting to catch on to the line. It's flipped. I won't do that. But I mean, Evloev, Emmett, Korean Zombie, Calvin Cater, we can forgive him for those 4 losses. I think all 4 of those guys handedly beat a guy like Damon Jackson, but it's a good test here for Damon Jackson. If he beats Dan Ige, he's going to put the division on notice. Sabatini was a great win, but this will be a phenomenal win in Dan Ige. But yeah, Dan Ige losing to Evloev, I think he's top 10, Emmett top 10 guy, Zombie top 10 guy, Calvin Cater top 10 guy. All these guys are top 10 guys. So I think it's a big step down for Ige, a big step up for Jackson. And I think Ige does finish Damon Jackson at some point in this fight. And I'm curious to see where that finish only is, hoping for plus money. But if not, I'll just bet Ige inside the distance, which on 5 dimes it was plus 420, but it's got completely smashed to now plus 225. So, and it looks like money is coming back in on Jackson. It's about minus 115 for Dan Ige right now and minus 105 for Jackson. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I do like Ige quite a bit, but yeah, nothing on this fight yet. Kind of waiting for the props to open up.
Yeah, it's a great fight, and I can't wait to see how Jackson handles the step up in competition. But that win over Sabatini is a hell of a win. And then the Argueta and the Camuela Kirk wins before that, also very impressive. So he deserved a step up in competition. I know Damon Jackson was trying to get that Bryce Mitchell fight when Mitchell's opponent fell out, but yeah, this is going to be a good one, man. Can't wait for it.
Absolutely. And lastly, we have the main event. We have Nassourdine Imavov going against Kelvin Gastelum. We got Imavov, 27 years old, 6'3", 75-inch reach. Gastelum, 31 years old, 5'9", with a 71-inch reach. Huge tail-to-tape advantage here for Imavov, being 4 years younger, having a 6-inch height advantage and a 4-inch reach advantage. Imavov is 4-1 in his last 5 fights, a decision win against Jordan Williams, a decision loss against Phil Hawes, a knockout win against Ian Heinisch, knockout win against Edmund Shabazian, and then a decision win against Joaquin Buckley. Gastelum's 1-4 in his last 5 fights, a decision loss to Darren Till, a submission loss to Jack Hermanson, a decision win against Ian Heinisch, a decision loss to Robert Whitaker, and a decision loss to Jared Cannonier. So, yeah, it's another spot where Kelvin Gastelum has been fighting very good competition, guys like Adesanya, Whitaker, and Cannonier. And Imavov is taking a step up here, fighting guys like Shabazian, Buckley, Jordan Williams, guys like that. But I think Imavov's the real deal. I think he's a very good striker. He's going to have a big size advantage here. The thing I worry about with Imavov and in this fight is the cardio. He did not look good in the Buckley fight in that third round. He was looking up at the clock like 2 or 3 times, midway through that third, towards the end of the third, looking up at the clock. Like, this is a 5-round fight. And my concern is I don't see him finishing Kelvin Gastelum early, just due to the fact that Kelvin Gastelum has an absolute brick for a head. The dude's never been knocked out. It's hard to see Imavov finishing him early. And my concern is what happens when this fight gets into the third round, the fourth round, the fifth round. How does Imavov look in that type of fight? So another one of those fights where I really like Imavov, and I think this is a good matchup for him, but I can't lay minus 200 on him when I can't really trust his cardio in those later rounds as of yet. He's going to have to kind of show me what he looks like in those later rounds, because I think it does get extended. I'd be kind of surprised if he finished Gastelum here. So should be a fun main event. Should be a back and forth war. Weezy, how do you feel about this main event here?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure, because this guy, we haven't seen much from Imavov that hasn't been really impressive lately. But the thing that I'm worried about is like Ian Heinisch fight for Gastelum. We actually saw him go to the wrestling, and if you look at his last 6 fights at the UFC level, 8 takedown attempts, 5 takedown attempts, 14 takedown attempts, 1 takedown attempt against Hermanson, 4 against Till, and 9 against Adesanya. And then in the 5 fights before that, 0 takedown attempts in all 5 fights. So I kind of feel like Kelvin's going to have to wrestle here, right? I mean, Kelvin's got good boxing. We know he's more experienced than Nassourdine, and we know that he's been fighting at a higher level than Nassourdine has at the UFC level. But look, Nassourdine's 6 inches taller than this dude. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage, and it's a southpaw versus orthodox matchup. We're not really seeing Gastelum win a ton of minutes on the feet here. But Imavov, 76% takedown defense, but giving up 28% control time. So that's a little bit alarming. I kind of feel like Kelvin has a path to win this fight if he fights smart. And in my opinion, the smart game plan for Gastelum would be to go out there and wrestle these first 2 rounds. Take Nassourdine into deep water. Get him into that third round, where we saw Phil Hawes even lose the third round, but still be able to, while on skates, put Nassourdine's back up against the cage and hold him there for long periods of time. And oftentimes, what was even more frustrating about that, Brady, was that Nassourdine was putting himself in those situations when he had Kelvin on skates. When he had Phil Hawes on skates. So it's interesting here. We've got to find out more about Nassourdine Imavov. I mean, I think that if you're really trying to be prudent about laying juice, you don't want to lay juice, on a guy like Imavov at minus 210 against a guy in Gastelum whose last 5 opponents have been Jared Cannonier, fought for a title, Robert Whitaker, former champion, Ian Heinisch, Jack Hermanson, and Darren Till, while, Nassourdine's fighting Jordan Williams, Philip Hawes, Heinisch, Shabazian, and Joaquin Buckley. So it's a big step up in competition for Nassourdine Imavov. We've never seen Nassourdine Imavov go 5 rounds. and he's fighting a guy that's way more experienced than him at the UFC level. I mean, Nassoudine's got 210 less minutes in the UFC cage in comparison to Gastelum. He's got 10 less pro fights. He's got 15 less UFC level fights. And Kelvin has actually shown that he can wrestle and that he's doing that a lot more often in his most recent performances. And we've seen Imavov be actually vulnerable to that type of a game plan just as recently as the Phil Hawes fight, Brady. So Gastelum's fought the better brand of competition, the more experienced competition. He's got the better wins. He's got the better wrestling. And he's more experienced here. But Imavov's younger. He's longer. He's the far better striker, and he's got the much more sneaky submission game. His front chokes are nasty, Brady. So I am very interested to see how this one plays out, because I think that if you put a gun to my head and say pick somebody on the money line here, I'm going to go with the more experienced guy in Gastelum, a guy that I know I can count on his durability, a guy that I know has been 5 rounds against the best, and a guy that is never going to give up and that he's really tough, the guy that's always going to fight for your money, rather than Imavov just assuming that he's going to look good in a 5-round fight, assuming that he's going to be able to get Gastelum out of there early, because if he doesn't, Kelvin's going to keep walking forward. Kelvin's going to wrestle, and Kelvin's going to make this fight difficult on Nassourdine. And we've seen a much inferior fighter in Phil Hawes have success and actually win a fight against Imavov, winning minutes in those grappling exchanges. And I think Kelvin can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of assumptions, man, laying minus 210 on Imavov. And the thing is, I think a lot of people are very high on Imavov, and rightfully so. The guy's phenomenal. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are very down on Kelvin Gastelum, right? So we see that Imavov minus 210, Gastelum plus 180. If this was a 3-round fight, I think it makes my decision a lot easier. I would be going with Imavov here. But since it's a 5-round fight, I mean, that just adds to the question marks for me on the cardio. You know, what does this fight look like in that 4th or 5th round? So it's kind of dog or pass for me. And then Obnoxious American MILF #1 says Kelvin has moved to fight ready, which I think, if so, that's a phenomenal move for him.
Phenomenal move, because guess what? The guys at Fight Ready, and you'll hear this from Brandon and Santino when they talk about their podcast, and they talk about what makes their camp so much better than a lot of the new ones these days, is these guys concentrate on cage wrestling. It's not just the open mat wrestling. It's what you do when your back's up against the cage and when your opponent's back is up against the cage. And if you can dominate those exchanges and use those judo takedowns, those trips, reach, sweeps that you can get in those positions, if we see Kelvin, who we've already seen go to the wrestling more, you know that Santino is going to be telling him to wrestle here. I mean, that's when he's at a 4-inch reach disadvantage and a 6-inch height disadvantage and a youth and speed disadvantage here, probably a power disadvantage too. I would assume that Santino is going to tell Kelvin to wrestle here, and if he does, I think Kelvin's going to be live.
Yeah, I think he's very alive at this number. That is for sure. Plus 180. So we'll have to see where that goes. I think we covered everything, Weezy, all 12 fights. Any final thoughts on the card?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this card. You know, I don't think it's the best card in terms of name value, but there's some bangers. There's some really interesting prospects. You know, like I said, you're never going to find Hani Barcelos at plus 5. Let me ask you something. Brady, is Hani Barcelos a bum? Is he a bum because he's 34 years old?
No.
Is he a bum because he got robbed out of a decision against Timur Valiev when he almost finished him in the 2nd round and Keith Peterson, drunk off his ass, refused to stop the fight? Does that make him a bum?
No.
You know, and at the same time, you got a guy in Umar Nurmagomedov who is minus 700 against a legend in Hani Barcelos. So you've got some guys here that have got really wide lines. Javid Basharat, Alan Nascimento, Umar Nurmagomedov, and they're all really good fighters, but, you know, they're probably juiced up a little bit too far. Hashtag juiced to the tits is what really sums up this week, Brady, is we've got some money lines that have just went way too far in one direction, but they are all really promising fighters with really bright futures. So I see why they're getting bet up. It's going to be a very interesting show me spot for a lot of these big favorites on this card.
Yep, absolutely. I have two bets so far. I have the under in the flick fight. I really like that, and then I also took a shot on the under on the Argueta Bulgarian fight as well. So those are my two spots so far, and I'm going to see where these props open up. Hopefully, they start getting them out tomorrow, and then we're doing probability tomorrow, right?
Yes, we are. And I've got my prop template all set up.
Let's go.
I've already got 2 units on the over 2.5 for the Sijara Eubanks Priscilla Cachoeira fight. I've got 1 unit on the under 2.5 in the Argueta Bulgarian fight. And I'm looking at some of these other spots. I'm looking at that Mateus Mendoza money line. I'm looking at Carlos Hernandez by decision, hopefully at plus 500. I'm looking a little bit at that Gastelum money line. Hell, the under 2.5 in the Barcelos Nurmagomedov fight is plus 200. Think about that. A guy in Nurmagomedov who's a minus 700 favorite against a legend in Hani Barcelos, and people think that this fight only finishes a third of the time. If this kid is that good, he probably is finishing Barcelos. And at a fat plus money number and plus 200, I think that's worth a look as well. The prop template has that as a trifecta bet. Man, this is a fascinating week to kick off 2023 from a betting perspective, and I think that there are some spots that are sticking out.
Yep, absolutely. It's a car where I'm going to keep it kind of lightish. I feel like a lot of these lines have just got smashed over the past several weeks. And then next week we have UFC 283, which is going to be fun as well. But yeah, guys, we did it. All 12 fights. Thank you so much for hanging out. Weezy, let the people know the plans for the week and where they can find you.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can find me tomorrow on the MMA Engine YouTube channel, where we're going to be doing probability before Clint goes live on the Pub Sports Radio with his Diehard MMA podcast. On Tuesday night at 10 o'clock Central Time, I'll be going live on my YouTube channel, Uncle Weezy, for Just the Tip with Uncle Weezy. We'll break down all 12 of these fights from a tape study and from a stats perspective. I'm going to give you all my track bets and finish with Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week. And then on Wednesday, we're going to do the DFS show right here on Pub Sports Radio, 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock Central Time. And then we're going to do Ask Weezy, 10 o'clock Central Time, Wednesday night. I'm really looking forward to starting off 2023 with a winning week and helping all of us, Brady, stack cash tickets like flapjacks with lots of butter, lots of syrup here in 2023. Let's eat, man. I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. I can't wait to see who the first ass shaving of the week is going to be. I know it's not going to be Alhassan, right? I think you retired from him, right?
I can't do that, man. And I broke my own rule. I said in 2022, there were going to be no more female ass shavings of the week. And what do? I picked Cheyenne Vlismus the last week of the year. And, I got served. And I deserved to get served because I didn't follow my own rule. Got hurt there. Corey McKenna. God damn you, Corey McKenna.
I know, right? Where was that against Elise Reed? Come on.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Evidently, She didn't watch what Sijara Eubanks did to Elise Reed.
I guess not. But yeah, guys, leave a like, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter, DFS_numbers, Instagram, DFS by the numbers. My prediction video will be out tomorrow on DFS by the numbers. And like Weezy said, probability Monday, MMA Engine, DFS show Wednesday, Pub Sports Radio, and then I'm going live on my channel Friday and Saturday. Saturday actually debuting a new show as well, so make sure you guys tune into that. So see you guys later. Best of luck for UFC Vegas 67. See you guys later.